And hello to everyone. So good to see you all. And for those of you guys that weren't on the call with us this morning, Happy New Year. Hopefully 2021 is starting off good for you and your families and your program participants. So again, like Jesse said, thanks for joining us. I know some people are late afternoon, some people are early evening. So thanks for taking some time here to chat with us. For those of you that weren't on the meeting this morning, it was covering an important topic of returning to play and creating a COVID plan as well as a plan B. So we do actually want to stress that we want you guys to watch that when it comes out and think about some of those things and be in touch with Shelly, Jesse, and myself to make a plan. We will release the competition series schedule at the end of this month, if not earlier. So want to make sure you guys are all watching what we talked about this morning. Today is really just a chance, or tonight is a chance to get together and talk about some other things. We want to be a resource to you guys at Move United, and we want to start to enhance everyone's individual events as well as the series as a whole, so that we're offering a consistent level of service to the athletes and just really doing good, impactful things. So we'll try to try to add different things like this throughout the year. It's obviously a lot easier through the Zoom platform than it was before, and everybody's used to these things now. So no reason to jump on calls like this more often and talk as a group and as a network. So tonight we're gonna dive into some things about data. You guys might not like data, but it's important things so that we could progress this movement forward and really show the value of what we're doing and try to attract new athletes and new funders. We'll dive into some things about data. We'll dive into some things about marketing and media so that you could elevate your events in that way. And then we'll hear from some people on best practices. So really excited that there's some Move United staff on the call tonight, and we thank them for taking time out of their evening. And there'll be plenty of time for you guys to chime in as well and share your best practices and ideas and questions. So again, thank you for being here tonight and being a part of this network and doing awesome things for the athletes and for keeping your spirits up in this really crazy, unpredictable time we're in now. Hopefully we're almost through. There's light at the end of the tunnel eventually. So let's just keep keeping our spirits up and uniting together. I believe Shelly, is that correct? Shelly, you go ahead and talk a little bit more about tonight and introduce the first topic.
Well, thank you and welcome. We're so glad to have all of you, and thank you for taking time out of your evening. This is what we plan to tackle here in the next hour and a half. We're going to talk a little bit about the sanctioning application. We're going to spend some time on data collection. Not the sexiest topic, but at the same time, it's necessary. We have some guests from Move United this evening, education and training and marketing and communications. So I'm excited to introduce you to members of our team. Then we also have some guest speakers from Arizona Disabled Sports and Angel City Sports that are going to talk about unique event opportunities. So let's jump in here. So the sanctioning application process started in December. I sent out a link, and in that link, I also included a link to our sessions that we had in November. I'm not going to spend a lot of time this evening on sanctioning requirements because we did cover that in November. So be sure to, if you need some additional information, be sure to go back and look at those sessions that we did in November. In addition to a link to those sessions, there's also a Word document that was included with the application that allows you to see what information we're collecting for 2021. And there's some additional questions in the application itself. However, the bulk of the information is what we have collected in years past. So there really shouldn't be any surprises with that. we understand that the challenge of completing that application is that so many things are changing right now. So, given that, we would like to have you fill out as much of the application as you can by February 15th. And then as things change, because we know they will, as things change, if you just keep us in the loop, then we can update that information as well. So the process, when you actually complete the sanctioning application, is you'll receive a confirmation email, and that confirmation email is going to list out all of the requirements for sanctioning, as well as give you links to documents that you will need access to. So things like the Move United release of liability and the media release, the physical activity survey, which the physical activity survey is new this year. It's a survey that was designed to measure the importance and the impact of the member organization events and programs for the people that we serve. So with that, let me just glance at my notes, if you don't mind here. We understand that it is a process and that things are kind of up in the air right now. So we want you to know how much we appreciate you just going through the process and your patience with all of this. And we really feel that it's valuable to have the experts in our focus sports involved. And ultimately it leads to really quality meets and consistency across the competition. So thank you for that. Before I move on, we're gonna talk about data collection, but before we move on, is Joe Walsh on the phone? I don't know, Jesse, if you can see if Joe's participating. Joe Walsh is with Adaptive Sports New England, and they are our newest sanctioned event. So they're going to be doing track and field and swimming as a new event. So Joe, if you are there, welcome. We're happy to have you. And really, for any of the events that are new, please reach out to us. We're here to be a resource for you, and we want to give you everything that you need to be able to run an event that really is successful. So sanctioning and data collection. If you look at the list on the screen, you'll see that there really isn't anything new in this list. So these are things that we have been collecting. I will be in the next week, I'll be sending out a document that has all of these data questions and the answers that you can include within your event registration. We realize that a lot of the events use Simply Register, and we'll also be using Simply Register for junior nationals. So a lot of the information that we're asking in your event registration, we can set up a template within Simply Register, and you can use that, use that template. They can just copy that over to your event registration. So we're trying to make this as painless as possible. We're going to have some new data collection here in 2021. And in 2020, Move United, in its commitment to embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, created the Move United DEI team. We have the director of DEI, Cheryl, was unable to be with us this evening, but Krista is also a member of that team, and she is our senior education manager. So in order for Move United to really honor that DEI commitment, we need to better understand who we're serving. The data collection that is new for 2021 was really born out of that initiative. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Krista, and I'm going to turn it over to her so she can talk a little more about that initiative as well as the data collection. Krista?
Thanks, Shelley, and good evening / good afternoon to everyone. I see some familiar faces, but a lot of individuals that I haven't had the pleasure to meet yet. So as Shelley said, my name is Krista Rapocchio. I am Move United Senior Education Manager. I've been with the organization since roughly March 2020. And I have also taken a larger role with our newer department, the DEI department that Cheryl is the director of. And in her absence tonight, I'm here just to give a really brief overview of some of the actions that we've taken since late spring, early summer, and how we're hoping to see that show up in some of our partners and members and events that and competitions that we're putting on now, but then in the future as well. So Move United created a vision and mission around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We recognized early on that there are inequities that exist within the disability community and in how we are serving it. And we also know that one of the buzzwords of 2020 was definitely inclusion, diversity, but you also, I'm sure, are all familiar that disability is often left out of that conversation. So this is twofold. It's both external and then internal to the disability community. So to help us meet our commitment to ensure that we are truly and equitably supporting all, Move United formed a diversity, equity, and inclusion department, and we created 6 pillars of action to guide us in our work. And we know this is not an overnight process. It's kind of a long-standing commitment, and thankfully Move United has put its operational and financial resources, its staff, behind this initiative and this commitment. And these pillars cover everything from marketing efforts, expanding our reach, looking at our programs and our competitions, forming a leadership team, looking at our own internal policies, because it's really hard to hold people to standards that you don't hold yourself to. So we've been trying to do a lot of work internally and then share that out to our larger community as well. And the 2 pillars that really have to do the most closely with data collection, why this is a topic right now, is both inciting equity, which has to do with building programmatic events that are fully inclusive and are fully welcoming to all people with disabilities, and then expanding our reach. How do we build mentorship? How do we build grant programs for our members, for our events, for our prospective organizations that are looking to join, that are led by and or serving diverse communities? So this is a little bit about what is guiding us. And then Shelley, if you want to just switch to the next screen here, that has really influenced the way that we have collected data. And for everybody on this call that has signed up for a Move United event anytime pretty much within the last 7 months, you might have interacted with these questions on our virtual registration forms, whether that's through Cvent or whether that is through Eventbrite or any system that we really have been using. And we've tried to make a conscious effort to make sure that these questions and the respective responses match other data points that you could compare them to, that you can analyze, and that you can use this data. So some of the new questions that we have added for the second half of 2020 and 2021 as well is we've asked a registration question around pronouns. This is one of the more recent questions that we actually have added to our registration. We ask this whether it's presenters that are registering or sending an RFP and completing RFP out, whether this is virtual attendees, whether this is athletes. We do not make this question mandatory, it is optional, but we have found that people are more than willing to share their pronouns with us. And you'll see the pronouns also coming up in different Zoom meetings or in different kind of biographies. So that's one of the questions that's new. The second question that I wouldn't say is necessarily new, but has been more streamlined, are the two questions around race and ethnicity. And I'll explain in a moment why they are separated, but we are following the language that is found on the census, which is where a lot of the data comparisons come to and come through when you're looking at the data that the government has released around people with disabilities and certain statistics. So we have the question here with race and the different racial categories. Just to note, because you will see it on every question, there's always a prefer not to say. And that is certainly fine for anyone to check if they don't feel comfortable disclosing this information. And then you'll also see an option always that says not listed. Previously, you might have seen the word other there, but that's certainly a word we're trying to get away from using, where you're literally othering somebody by answering a question. So in these options where you see not listed, a text box can open up where the participant or registrant can type in an answer if it's not there. The next set of questions that are also new, if you want to just, perfect, thank you, Shelley, switch, have to do with ethnicity, which you see here is identified as being of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. There is a question, once again, around preferred language. This one we do leave optional as well. And then there are two questions that are also new related to gender and to sexual orientation. So identify my gender as female, male, non-binary, prefer to self-describe, or once again, that option to prefer not to say. And then the question of, do you consider yourself a member of the LGBTQ community? And once again, yes, no, or prefer not to say. And then with those new questions and with the outstanding questions that we always ask, there's kind of thought around all of the questions you see on this slide. So why should you collect it, how best to collect it, and any best practices around it, and then what to do next. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you will see an identity wheel. And this identity wheel is something that our team has used even in just initiating conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was created by the University of Michigan, so do not take credit for it whatsoever. It's a great resource. Prior to my time at Move United, I was a New York City public school teacher for 10 years, and this is something that we used in the classroom with high school students. But what this identity wheel does is it allows you to look at the different elements of your own identity, and that helps you know kind of your own positionality when it comes to being inclusive. And it also is a great conversation starter in understanding and unpacking the differences in some of these terms. Language is always evolving, and language that we used literally just 5 years ago has already changed and transformed, and we know that's going to happen again. So by any means, these aren't permanent definitions, but it's kind of currently where people in identity work are focused towards, and they also contributed shaping our the way that we collect our information and our data. And really, I think the two that we just wanted to explain in this meeting, just in case you field any questions, and we could provide you kind of that resource, is the difference between race, ethnicity, and national origin, and then the difference between gender, sex, and sexual orientation. The reason why we wanted to explain and just make sure everybody has the resources and tools and knowledge that they need around race, ethnicity, and national origin is because, as you did note during 2 slides previously where we had the race and ethnicity question broken out separately, a lot of questions have come up from whether registrants or staff members, around why separate those two questions. One question specifically asking about Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin, and excluding that from the race category question. And the reason for that is that race, ethnicity, and nationality all have a slightly different composition in terms of identity. So race is a category, a social construct based on a person's color of their skin. And there are different racial categories that you saw listed out, but within each racial group, you can also have different ethnic categories or ethnic groups. So when you have for example, a group that is primarily from Latin America, just because, for example, they are born in a certain country or from a certain country doesn't mean that there aren't a multitude of races within that one country. So that is why the category is separated out. Ethnicity has to do with your culture, with your traditions, where your ancestors are from. So for example, I know it's probably really hard to guess, but my last name's Rapocchio. My ethnicity is Italian, right? My race is white, but my nationality or my national origin is American. I was born here in the United States. So it's kind of just the difference there. And particularly with events that fall under competitions, junior nationals, different competition meetings, sanctioning events. I know that Shelley does have the question there around national or citizenship, because that is important when it comes to placing and competing. So that would tie in more to national origin. The other difference in questions, just to be aware of, and I'm speaking to people that, you know, probably have a whole range of knowledge here, so I do apologize if this is repetitive to you. But the difference between gender, sex, and sexual orientation, just to know the difference there, because you will note that we ask for gender and we don't use the word sex, and you'll see in a lot of documents that that's a similar pattern that many people are using as well. The easiest way to describe the differences here is your sex is how you were or what you were born and assigned at birth based on like anatomy and you know, your birth. Your gender is how you identify, and there are two different kind of components to this. There's your gender identity, which is internal, and it's how you yourself identify, and then gender expression, which is how you present yourself out to the world. So because as we move towards inclusion and we are constantly in a state of learning and understanding, the reason why gender is now used more often, much more often than sex, is because we know that not everything is as simple as male and female in the world currently. So that's why you have the question around non-binary, of course, always allowing somebody to self-describe, and then always, of course, that safety of preferring not to answer. And then sexual orientation has to do, if gender is internal and how you express yourself internally, sexual orientation is how you essentially express yourself externally with who you choose to love. So there you have members of the LGBT community. So we just wanted to provide that information just in case, as you're using these questions for possibly the first time, you had your own understanding and knowledge of why those questions are separate, but then also some of the differences in language that are being used. And myself and Cheryl and anybody else that is a part of the Move United DEI leadership team or DEI department or our staff are happy to help assist answer any questions that you might get, or to kind of talk through some of these pieces if anything does come up. So with all those definitions, we ask these questions not to invade personal space, which is an argument you hear used a lot, like, oh, why are we identifying people by labels? Why are we asking all these questions? But to have a truly inclusive event and to build an inclusive community, it's not only important to know who is there at your event, who is there at your table, but also who's missing. And one of the easiest ways to do that, even though, as Shelley said, it's not the sexiest way to do any of this work, is through data collection. And how to collect that data, a really easy way and best practice is just to build it into your registration process. And that's why we've added these questions. We also add a disclaimer in a sense at the top that explains why we're asking, that, you know, nothing personal is going to come from these questions. You know, everybody's answers are confidential and are obviously just used from a perspective of seeing who exactly is, you know, where are the gaps, where are the barriers, where can we make access easier for different groups of underserved communities. And then really what to do with this is to put it into action. So you'll notice that Move United will probably not ask all of these questions for the rest of our existence, and we won't ask them for every event. We'll set a piece of, whether it's time or date range or one particular event, and we'll use it to collect a pulse of data. And then based on your measurement, you come back. And so, for example, our leadership conference is once a year. So moving forward, maybe once a year, we take that snapshot of what the data looks like. And of course, you only want to ask questions that you're going to use. So when you ask these questions, it would be, okay, how can you, and then how can we help support you in building an inclusive event? And if you notice that a population at your event skews a certain way, or you're missing people that you know are a part of your community, then how can we build some actionable plans to change that in the future and build a truly inclusive event? So at this point, I think we'll open it up for any possible questions that you all might have. And if there's a question you have now, we're happy to answer it. I'm happy to answer it. If there's a question that comes to mind at a later date or at another time, or you'd rather just ask it one-on-one, I can leave my email with Shelley here. We could send it out in a wrap up, and you're certainly more than welcome to contact me. But are there any questions that I could answer for anybody at this moment on data collection?
Just, I have one thing. This is Susan, but I'll sit tight till after anyone asks questions.
Okay, Susan.
If you're more comfortable, you can certainly submit it in chat. We are monitoring the chat. Or if there's just questions or concerns that you have with regards to the data collection, this is the time to bring that up. We have our resident expert here, so this would be a good time to address those.
I have a question. Since we're asking about gender and sexual orientation, then is it a requirement if a male comes in and says, no, I'm female, that we have to open up our division to females? I mean, to any male that wants to race in a female event? Do you have a policy in place?
Hi, Denise. That is an excellent question, and one that has come up numerous times in conversations of thinking through this and how do we want to approach this and go about this. At this time, because there has not been official guidance, originally there was supposed to be guidance on this coming out right after the 2020 Olympics and Paralympics, but that obviously got pushed, so the guidance got pushed as well. We're going to leave the question with gender, but when you heat your athletes, you're doing that because there's no guidance based on sex. So to make the term and the question more inclusive, we're guiding to use gender. But if you have an athlete or an individual that, for example, checks non-binary or prefers to self-describe and write something in, that is where it would have to be a more one-on-one conversation with that person. And that's when you can let them know, and obviously we're here to kind of provide any guidance with that, but let them know that at this time, we don't have the oversight to kind of change how it's been, whether that's what you believe or not in terms of like wanting to change it. But I don't think that until that official guidance comes down, we don't have a way to kind of change it in a sense. So if that answers, I know that's a concern, but I think at this point, and Susan and Shelley and Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're still going to heat by male and female, and then handle it by case basis. If somebody else asked to compete, for example, in, they identify as a female, for example, but they are, their sex is a male.
And that Denise was the topic I was going to bring up, depending on if somebody else asked it. So I'm glad you asked it, because I know it's on a couple people's minds. And so the authority that Krista is mentioning is basically the international federations would set those rules for each of the sport versus us as Move United, and we're following those rules. So we don't anticipate it being a lot of people that wouldn't check those boxes of male, female. And on a case-by-case basis, the event directors or we can get in the mix here of, like Krista said, approaching through a phone call those people that do. Because
you said that the gender was how they self-identify. Therefore, I wouldn't know that this male identifies as a female. I put him in the females, and I don't want to hear the repercussions from the females. And what happens at that point? I mean, legally, what can I do? I mean, I run a huge meet. There's a good chance something like that would happen at a meet our size or junior nationals. So
yeah, Denise, another option that might help alleviate some of the concern there, and then like, what do you do, is underneath the question, or even like with a little asterisk and then below the whole form, if that's the way that it's set up, but just kind of put a 1-sentence liner there where it references the organization that Susan was just referencing, and saying that at this time we are following this guidance, and because of that, we're unable to take our own stance on this, or something else that kind of allows people to understand that we're following like a much larger guidance at this point. And somebody just came in, just look at this chat question here. If that is, so Jennifer also just asked in the chat to clarify, we are asking both sex and gender at the registration. If you wanted to ask both questions, you certainly could, or you could, just add that asterisk there, that sentence of kind of just like a notice of what you would have to do, or why that conversation would come up if you did feel that you identified and that wouldn't be recognized, for example, at the event.
Can you send us that international policy so that we have it in hand?
That's definitely something that we could
That
do.
would be helpful.
Sure, that's an easy solving solution, so not a problem.
And if we do choose to go with the route of asking both gender and sex, we should probably have a little definition behind it, so they understand, well, why does this say male, female? Why does this say 4 choices? They might not understand the definition between the difference between gender and sex. So, just a little expansion on that question so people understand it.
That was a great question, though. Thanks, Denise, for bringing that up and asking. So I'm sure you are not the only one thinking it.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
With regard, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you mentioned that this was going to be going in, would be on Simply Register, and that there was going to be a template that was going to be used. that would be put into everybody who uses Simply Register into their registration application or whatever you want to call it. And then you said that the answers were going, I believe you said that the answers were going to be, as a meet director, let me kind of rephrase that. As a meet director, I can go in to Simply Register and I can look at any of my athletes' applications. Now, if all these answers on here, we're asking for gender, all their identities and all this other personal information, I thought you said that that was going to be somehow hidden or anonymous and not accounted for within, that it was, you were just collecting the data. But if I can go in and see it, then I can put in a face and a name to somebody there. And that to me is not protecting the privacy of the individual that is entering the data. I may or may not know whether my athletes have, whether they're bisexual or, fall into the LBG. I don't really care, but that is not something that should be, they may have told me, they may have other feelings, whatever, because different coaches have different relationships with their athletes. And I think any of the coaches can attest to that sometimes the kids come to us or the athletes come to us because they don't want to tell their parents. They trust, they want to get some feedback from us on how to present stuff to their families. So if I can, and if I already know this, why does everybody else who has access to those applications and the information on there, how come they're able to also say, oh, well, John Smith, wow, I had no idea that John and Mary were, were this or that or whatever. I'm just concerned about the privacy and who sees it.
Do you, and this is, I apologize, I don't have full knowledge of your staff and how many people would be a part of this, but is it more of a concern that this information would be shared outside of your staff, or that you just don't see the need for like your whole staff or however many people to have access to this information?
People at Simply Register can see it. Anybody who, obviously me as the meet director can see it, and if I grant access to some of my other coaches or to the coach to see what their athlete has put down, that, and they may or may not have that same kind of relationship, you are invading their privacy to me. And if that, and how is that information when it gets back to you because of you being, not you yourself, but Move United or to whoever is collecting all the data? How do we know for sure that you're not going to find out that John so-and-so is actually gay and somebody else is bisexual and whatever, and be able at some point to, and you could let it slip. You could say, oh, in a conversation with somebody, oh, did you know that we had that so-and-so from from here is, and he's here now, but is it a he or a she, or what are they doing, that kind of thing. And I'm very concerned about that because a lot of people, particularly kids and young teenagers, they're in a difficult position because they don't know whether they want to come out or not, and they're trying not to. And if that information gets out, that's going to be very disturbing to them and very upsetting, and that's truly an invasion of their privacy.
Yeah, Trisha, I think that's, to be completely honest, I think that's a great point, and I think that's really valid. Like I said, I was a high school teacher for 10 years, and I had very numerous moments where I had the privilege of somebody trusting me, a teenager trusting me to, tell me something about them that they didn't feel safe or comfortable telling anybody else yet. So I know how much of not only like a special relationship that is, but the trust that's there. I can only speak to the point where you mentioned, like when it comes to Move United or when it comes to like a larger organization or is shared and what if it slips. I know that we've collected close to like 9,000 registrants at this point. What we do with that data as an organization is we just run reports on percent. There has been nobody on the team that goes in and looks at like an individual level of who is submitting who, but it's really more of a larger picture, because we do know that these communities, they exist and they're underserved. So it's more just about, okay, is that an access or a barrier, and how do we change it? So that's really the view from what we're looking at. But that's, I think the other concern that you brought up around like privacy and the gratitude of having somebody's personal information and them not being ready to share that personal identity with others, and what if you slip, or what if they don't want others to find out. That's why we have the prefer not to say answer on there. And that doesn't indicate necessarily, if they choose prefer not to say, that it means one thing or another. It's just that they're not ready yet to have that information publicly available. And what we found is that most people that will select, whether it's the LGBTQ question, whether it's the pronoun question, whether it's the gender question and clicking non-binary, most people that, and I can never speak in absolutes and say every person, but most people that will identify in any of those categories, especially as the group that is the underprivileged group in those categories, they're comfortable with that being, I don't want to say like you go out to the world and you shout it out loud, because obviously that's never anybody else's place to do, but they're comfortable with that information being out there because that's who they are. That's how they identify. That's a huge makeup of who they are as a person. But what we see is that if somebody isn't yet ready or isn't comfortable, especially when it comes to youth, right? Because it's just a totally different ballpark when you're 14 and still figuring out, who you want to know certain things and who you are and what you want to share, versus when you're 50, although that's not always the case either. But that prefer not to say is there as kind of a safety check, and an option for anybody. And then you also always have the option, and I don't think this happens often, but in the situations and cases that you've kind of described there, and the fear and the hesitancy around somebody that's not yet ready to self-identify publicly, you also have the option to check something that kind of won't put your fear out into the world. So for example, if you were a member of the LGBT community, if you were a youth, or if you were a middle school student, for example, and you didn't want that out there, or for example, say a parent is filling this out and they don't know that information because their child hasn't come out to them yet, right? I see you kind of smiling a little bit. Had the same situation with students I taught, right? You're the only person that knows. That data won't be 100% accurate, and that's okay. It's okay if a parent fills it out and doesn't know and checks the wrong thing. It's okay if a child's not ready yet to have that information shared and checks the wrong thing. It's their personal choice. But for a child, a teenager, for example, that knows exactly who they are and has the, advantage of being out and open and okay with that, and has kind of the environment that supports that, then to see that question and see them recognized there in that space, it will help to serve as a more inclusive environment for them. And once again, there's no magic formula for any of this. There is no perfect cure for making every event inclusive. Questions aren't going to necessarily change the world, but it's building that dialogue, building that conversation, and allowing somebody to see themselves represented, even if it's something as simple as a question. But I think what you brought up is really important, and I think it's something for everybody to think through, and to know that your data might not be 100% perfect. People might choose to identify in a way that they're not comfortable yet 100% identifying as who they are, and so that might skew the data by one person or two people. or a handful of people, but it'll also just help us have those conversations to move forward. And when we do have, to connect to Denise's question that she asked earlier, about what do we do in certain situations where there's not really that official guidance yet, as that changes and as there are discussions at a different level that then trickle down to the work that we do on a continual basis, at least those conversations will be there and will be begun. So I know we can have a much larger conversation about this and a much longer conversation. I think it's really great that you've, as a coach, experienced like the power of somebody telling you exactly who they are and trusting you in that. And I know from you saying that you would always protect that information. I can assure you that we would 100% protect that information. And, I think the other answer, the prefer not to say that as a option is another kind of safety net in a way, if there is that hesitancy still. It's my very long-winded answer, sorry. Okay, are there any other questions at this point?
I have a question.
Sure.
This is Shar. I'm with swimming, and this may not be relevant at this point right now at all. But I was in a situation a number of years ago where the athlete was self-identifying as female or as male, was still female, was going to go through gender reassignment, hadn't yet done that kind of process, but wanted to compete as a male. And she was clearly still, gender assigned female. So my feeling was, if she identified as male and wanted to compete with the male athletes, I was okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I got a lot of pushback because of her physical appearance, because of clearly she hadn't gone through gender reassignment, a whole lot of that kind of, all the things that fall through with that question and that situation. And so this may not be the place to ask that. This may not be the place to address that at this point, but I went ahead and put her with the race that wanted to be part of, even though he was not appearing to be male. What is the situation that Mood United stance on that? Is that still part of that original statement of we don't have direction? Is that something that we're going to do just as meet directors or competition directors, or whatever our role may be, that's our call that we make and we back it up based on our decision making, being in charge? Do you have direction on that?
I definitely know I have personal opinions on it, but Susan, if I'm sure you're still on here somewhere, even though I can't see your screen anymore, but I think this ties into what you were saying earlier, if you wanted to just kind of speak to that. I think Susan's here. Hold on.
I'll speak for Susan until she comes in. So, and
Thanks,
Shar, I
Stephanie.
mean, that's a great example. And I think Denise maybe was touching on that a little bit with her question too. And we've had this conversation time and time again with Krista and team, and we don't have the answer to it. So our stance is that we are following the International Federation's guidelines. So, at this point, I mean, we've seen a lot in the news over the last few years with certain athletes that unfortunately got the spotlight, but we're just waiting for guidance from the levels higher up. So at this point, good or bad, I think we view sports still in a very black and white, male, female, sex kind of, how you were born is who you are, until we hear from those higher up as to what to do. Because I think that was I think that's a great story that you shared. I don't know. I wonder though, if people would respond the same way if it was a male who said he was transitioning to female, right? So we want to treat all athletes equally. And until we have guidance from above, I think we follow what's currently in the rule book.
And this is Susan. I agree with both Krista and Jesse. And Shar, the one thing I could say is we can begin to initiate those conversations with a few of the higher ups, you know, versus everybody knocking on their door kind of thing. It may take time, obviously, to change history and to change, you know, philosophy and things like that. But those dialogues can begin, and we could start to see some progress, hopefully, in the future.
This is Phil Galley. How are you? I would think that for track and field, we would look to World IPC and Para World Athletics and we would follow their guidance until we get another direction.
Yeah, Phil, I think that's a great point. And I think a lot of the executive directors are in a similar kind of situation where nothing has kind of been passed down yet. So you just look at the resources that you have and you see what's happening, and you make the most informed decision that you, of course, can. And then, you know, as Susan said, as the conversation evolves and things begin to change or move in one direction or another, then, you know, we all are part of that learning and that experience together, and we figure out, you know, what the next step is. So it's a good point. Are there,
but you can, if we don't follow those guidelines from above, then we are liable for a huge lawsuit, right? So especially when you get to junior nationals and you get someone who breaks a record and another individual starts to question their gender. And so I think we need to stick strictly to World Para Athletics, at least for track and field, and say that we're just following what their guidelines are. And if they change in the future, we'll follow those. But if we start making decisions based on something that we can't point to, then there's a serious libel suit.
Do we have any other questions out there? Anything on the table? So appreciate your openness and your honesty among everybody. It's not always a comfortable conversation, but it's one that we need to have. So it's great that you're willing to share and to talk about these things as they relate to competition and gathering data. If there is anything else, let's either pop that in the chat or unmute. Otherwise, we will move on.
and
Krista,
sorry, go ahead.
thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We appreciate all the information. I think it's always a good discussion.
Yeah, and just once again, I think it's probably at the top of the chat now, but my email's there. You can also find it right on Movie United's website. But I'm happy to, whether it's call or email or anything, continue a dialogue and have any conversations that are necessary, or if you're experienced, if something comes up and you just want a thought partner to kind of talk through it, I'm always happy to do that. So thanks for having me, and happy to kind of work together and figure this all out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Krista.
Okay. Actually, Krista, come back. I kind of forgot about these two slides.
Sorry, this will be super quick. This ties into my role as senior education manager. Just wanted to let everybody, you know, be up on the news and aware if you haven't heard already. But Move United's education conference, which previously was called the Leadership Conference, which was previously called the Adapt to Achieve Conference. It's gone through its own transformation, if you will. But just wanted to let everybody know that this year for 2021, we're going to have off of the success of the virtual conference last May, we're going to have kind of a hybrid model this year where we'll have a virtual conference that's going to take place in early June from June 1st to 3rd. It's more focused on education and awareness, whereas our in-person skills-based workshops will take place in Colorado Springs in mid-May. The reason to just bring this up really quickly is because we are always looking for resources and people that hold a lot of knowledge in their field and in their kind of respective role. And although it is kind of last minute, but at this point, our presenter RFP closes tomorrow. So if there was something that you were interested in presenting, whether that's a virtual workshop or an skills-based in-person workshop, we can also send that link out, and I can include it in the chat before I sign off tonight, if there is any interest for presenting. And if you don't have any interest in presenting, but you love to learn and you want to be a part of the event as an attendee, that information will be released in March. So just kind of stay tuned and stay on the lookout for that.
And Krista, I just want to chime in here for a minute. You know, we used to do the Adaptive Sports USA portion of the training conference in November, knowing that a lot of you guys often are booked and plugged into running your events in the spring. So we'll keep doing a meeting like we did this last November, where, you know, we talk through different issues you guys are having or different ideas or way to share best practices. We'll keep doing that informally as a small group in November. But certainly hope you guys could be a part of this bigger deal and bigger fun, either virtually or in person in May. And then one other thing is, I'm super impressed coming on now with Move United, just so many, not just Move United at the national office, but all the member organizations and everything collectively on the website and all the different webinar opportunities and things throughout the year. So the training education never ends. It's ongoing and there's something all the time. So if you guys at any point, we look at the surveys you guys have filled out, we talk to you, we hear you, just know that we always want to hear what kind of content you're looking for and what kind of needs you have around training and education. Something we could produce or something you might want to produce and put out through our platform. So this is pretty awesome. Krista's doing a great job, and I think this will be fun here in May and June.
Yeah, definitely. And looking forward to having some of you be a participant in one way or another, whether it's presenter or attendee. It's, as somebody that joined this community back in March, it's a community I definitely love, and I appreciate everybody's efforts and all the knowledge everybody brings. So I think that's it, Shelly. I don't think we need the next slide if you want to just, yep. So
Okay.
Have a great night or good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Krista. So we are moving on. We're going to talk about marketing and communications as it relates to elevating your events. And we're excited to introduce you to our Move United marketing and development team, which includes Jackie, our marketing manager, Sean, our communications manager, and Dave, our development director. So I am going to turn it over to whoever is up first.
Well, I can start. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dave Simonson. I'm the development director for Move United, and I've been the development person for the organization now for just over 10 years. I'm very happy to be here with you tonight with my teammates, Sean and Jackie, and I'm thrilled to be joined together with you in this Move United organization. So tonight, we wanted just to take a few minutes and highlight some of our communications and marketing work. We'll go through things pretty quickly, and I just want to offer that if you want to have an individual conversation with myself or Sean or Jackie, you can reach us via email. We're happy to talk over the phone as well about any of the topics we'll talk about tonight or other topics surrounding marketing and communication. You see here on the screen, I just wanted to highlight our vision statement. And the most important words in it could be the last three words. We are a community-based organization. The heart of what we do is through the Move United member network, and you are certainly a part of that. Currently, we have approximately 185 member organizations, and we are growing quickly in 43 states and DC. And so it is very important to us that we are providing the variety of supports that we can to help our community-based organizations grow and thrive. So the next slide gets even more specific about this. One of the pillar statements that we have is that is in our Vision 2028, which is a vision we have along a number of lines, what we want to, where we want to be when the Paralympics return to the United States in 2028. One of those key statements is that we will have a member organization within driving distance of 90% of the entire American population. So we have that aspiration, and you see significant growth happening in terms of the member network and an increasing commitment to provide the services that the network needs to grow. And we'll continue to do that so that we can get to this 90% target. The next slide talks a little bit on the marketing and communications side. You know, we recognize that too few people, even within the disability community, are aware of adaptive sports, the wide variety of them, where they go to participate in them, the events that you run. So, and as well as the general public. And so what we're committed to do is increase the awareness and engagement in adaptive sports and focus on making those connections from us to you, to our community partners. And we do that through a number of marketing and communication channels, some of which we'll go through today. And so the next slide just covers, we will highlight just a handful of these kind of channels that we work through for marketing and communication. Again, we'll touch on them. And if you want to talk about any of these or other marketing or communication topics after this meeting, we'd be very happy to have that phone call or email exchange with you. But to start us off, I'll ask Sean to talk about the magazine.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. And it is great to be with all of you. As Dave mentioned, you know, one of our kind of key roles is to support you in any way we can from a marketing and communications perspective. We see, you know, when you talk about marketing, public relations, communications, you know, we talk about our owned, you know, what we own, and that's our website, our social media, our email blasts. We talk about earned media, and that's traditional press, or whether it be TV or radio or print news coverage. And then of course paid, which is would be the advertising world if we have advertising dollars to spend. And so I'm going to highlight, you know, kind of the earned media component, and then I know Jackie's going to talk a lot about the owned media section. So if you're not familiar with Move United magazine, let's see, I don't know if it's not showing up. That's good. Okay. Let's see, there we go. If you're not familiar with Move United magazine, it is a print publication. It's one of the leading adaptive sports publications in the country. It's printed 3 times a year and sent out to over 35,000 households across the country. And it's also available digitally on our website, so folks can download the PDF version of it as well. And I mention it because it serves kind of 2 roles, particularly for you and the constituents you serve. First and foremost, as a member of the Move United Network, you have an opportunity to contribute an article each issue, or whether it be 1 or all 3 issues. We invite our members to submit upcoming events and programs to help you get the word out about what you're doing and hopefully reach new competitors, new athletes. And so it's a marketing tool that we offer and provide for you. On the flip side of that, we want to make sure that you encourage your constituents to actually sign up for the magazine. Part of the benefit of us as a collective network is we do in fact realize that we're part of a bigger movement. And so even if an athlete is competing in a track and field meet at your event, and that's, you know, one of the few things that they do, the fact that they, you know, can see through the magazine that there are opportunities to connect with the community and to be part of a larger movement is really powerful and helps really showcase the power that sport has. So I invite you to definitely submit content for the magazine, and I also invite you to encourage people to sign up, and you can do that in a number of different ways. If you want, you can obviously, and some of our members have, sent us an Excel spreadsheet with essentially the names, addresses, and whatnot of all the folks, and we automatically put them on the subscription list. Note, either way that we do this, we don't do anything else other than mail out the magazine. We don't sell our mailing list, nor do we solicit any other communications. The subscription mailing list is just that, as a benefit that we provide to adaptive athletes looking for opportunities and ways to grow and develop as athletes as well as individuals. If you're not comfortable with sending us, you know, some sort of an Excel spreadsheet or other list, then you can simply in either an email blast or a social media post to your constituents, invite them to click on a link that's on our website, and we can provide this information and invite them to sign up for this free publication. And that's the only piece of mail communications that they'll get from us. I also want to talk about, you know, some of the other ways that we promote the competition series in the winter issue of the magazine, which is probably still hitting mailboxes as we speak. We have a wonderful article that was written by Jesse to promote the whole competition series, and you'll see kind of the outline of dates and tentative dates and again, it shows the power of all of these events together. We have in the past and will continue to do so, you know, promote the competition series through blog posts and through, you know, future magazine articles, as well as through our social media, which I know Jackie will talk about. This year is one of the new tools, if you will, that we want to provide to you as event and meet organizers, is we have created a draft press release template. I know many of you may be in the weeds of organizing an event and all of that entails, that you may not have all the resources from a marketing and communications perspective. So we have drafted a template for a press release. And those are the types of resources and opportunities that we want to provide to you. So we'll make sure that Susan and Jesse and Shelley share that draft template. And it is just that, a template. So you're welcome to modify it, make it your own, use it. But it's something that hopefully will be of value for folks that may need some additional support in marketing or media relations or public relations. Raise your hand if you have a media list already. Let me see a show of hands of how many folks already have a media list. I only see like a handful of actual faces, but if you have a media list already, I invite you to put me on it. Many of our member organizations I invite to put me on as a member of the media, if you will, at least so that we can have the same type of information that you're sharing out to your local media, again, your local newspaper, your local TV station, etc. And that'll allow us to be in the know and know what you've got coming down the pike, the verbiage and everything else that you're sharing with it. So I extend that invitation to you. And then along those lines, if there's any other ways that we can support, as Krista and others mentioned, we are here to support you. So if you know, we could do a whole 3-hour workshop on public relations and media. And so if you want to talk through ideas, if you need support or suggestions on how to engage members of the traditional media, the local press, etc., you know, I'm happy to do that at any time. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jackie.
Thanks, Sean, and hello to everyone. I have met basically none of you, so I was really excited to get invited to this call. My name is Jackie Bears, and I joined the Move United team in August, so I might be one of the newest members, but thrilled to be a part of it, and really excited to kind of talk you guys through some of the marketing platforms that we are using. So to start with our website, I have the insane privilege of leading our website redesign project right now. And so in probably around the end of March, we'll be launching our new website. Basically, the goal of that is to improve our reach and expand our brand awareness. Currently, right now, we have 20 to 25,000 unique visitors a month. We're looking to double that potentially. And so we think that through this new website, we're going to offer a lot more value to our consumer, to you guys, to everyone who's visiting. And so part of that I think is really specific to this group is expanding on the chapter pages and the event pages. So each chapter, I have a cat and she only crosses the screen when I'm talking. So if you see movement, that's why. But so the chapter and event pages will basically host as much or as little information as you want. And so obviously we want as much information from everyone on their respective events as possible. So we're able to promote it on our channels. Through the website, folks will be able to refine by location, refine by dates. So they'll be able to look up events by dates. And we'll have a very simple form where you'll be able to submit your events. And then the more you kind of put into it, the more we're able to help you out. And so images are critical. Copy points, which basically kind of outline exactly what the event is and who should be partaking. Is important, and then we can pull that information, promote on our social channels, promote, through the magazine if Sean sees something. So really we're looking at those kind of cross-platform opportunities, and the website is going to serve as a great anchor for all of that. So more to come with that, but we're really looking forward to kind of the beginning of this year really kicking off strong with that new website. So stay tuned, and we'll be sure to provide more information to everyone once we're kind of hitting that final stretch. So then to kind of shift gears into social media, Susan, I saw you pop on. Did you have anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, Jackie said the website's in redevelopment, which is just a great opportunity with the two organizations merging to do this at this point and just give a fresh new brand and look. But there's a temporary landing page for competitions. It's moveunitedsport.org/competition. And so right now, all of your guys' events are listed with the dates that you've given us. And that's where we'll continue to make updates in real time as things shift, if they need to shift for COVID or whatnot. So just know that. And then Jackie also mentioned images, and it's not just another thing that we want to collect, like the data and the images. All this is for a reason to try to help, this whole movement and really advocate for all you guys and the athletes and what's happening nationally. So part of your sanctioning post report, I know you're used to this last year too, but we ask for at least 5 JPEG images that are high quality to be uploaded with that report. So that's kind of a streamlined part of the process. And then we'll be able to highlight some of those photos in different ways nationally. So just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. So to shift gears to social media, really, I thought I would kind of just share some of the best tips and tricks that I've noticed in marketing events and kind of what's been successful. So really the key part of this is to establish regular content with your audience. Obviously, some have larger social audiences than others. Maybe social media doesn't work for you, but that doesn't mean you can't transfer these to different things like email or maybe your website, just different sections. And so things like we started doing Member Monday, which hopefully you've seen on our social channels, but it's really kind of picked up traction because folks are interested in what other organizations are doing, and what better way than to kind of bring it through our platform to highlight. So if you haven't submitted and you're part of an organization, small pitch. But different pieces like meeting the team. So folks always want to see behind the scenes. So whatever, like introduce yourself, showcase how you came into what your role is at your respective organization, showcase different folks around your organization, showing behind the scenes, which is also kind of like the setup, what the buildup looks like to the event, especially in the virtual era now, relying on kind of those past events, looking at throwbacks, Throwback Thursday, Way Back Wednesday. You can kind of tie it into every day if you're strategic enough. But different ways to really kind of pull off that, oh yeah, I was there, I remember that, that was really fun, and to really kind of resonate with your audience in that way, especially with virtual. Then athlete features, have different athletes submit basic questionnaires. I mean, really, the more information you can provide is great, but the longer you get, the more you lose your audience. So really basic fun questions about different athletes who are participating in your event. To kind of go along with that, testimonials of volunteers from your event, what their experience was like, coaches, what that was like, athletes, of course, but thinking kind of outside of the box of an event is more than an athlete, it's more than just a coach, it's a whole group effort. And the more you can kind of pull in from those different audiences, the more you're going to expand your reach, because that person is then going to be like, hey, did you see I was featured on this social channel? They'll share it, their friends will see it and share it, and it'll be kind of like that ripple effect, which is really what we're all trying to do, is expand our footprint, expand who knows who we are. And then one that I'll kind of talk about a little bit is countdowns. And so really leading up to the event, because if it's a once a year event, maybe you don't have that full year calendar to fill your social feed, but really building up that awareness for your event leading up to it. So for Ski Spec, for instance, we did a 10-day countdown, which, you know, I think 10 is probably the maximum you should do. You can do kind of a 2-week out, but I wouldn't do it every day for 14 days. But really pulling different, we basically had a pretty straightforward form that said, what was your experience like with Ski Spectacular? What are you looking forward to this year since it's in the virtual setting? What are you looking forward to once it comes back? And kind of pulling different quotes from different folks around all different areas, whether they were athletes or volunteers or team members of Move United. We pulled it together in a format so everyone could kind of read a different person's story and feel some sort of connection to it, whether, wow, that sounds like a really great experience, or, oh, I was there, I saw that, I thought that was really neat, or that really sounds like something I should look into for next year maybe. But regardless, you're catching their eye and you're drawing their attention, and then they're sharing it out. So that's a little bit about kind of social media. And I think the next slide, so to kind of pivot from that Ski Spectacular example, basically to kind of talk about how we were marketing Ski Spectacular, which was virtual, which I was upset about because this would have been my first Ski Spectacular and I got to attend it virtually, but I look forward to it in person next year, or this year actually now. So for Ski Spectacular, as I mentioned, we wanted to really build up that awareness. So we did the 10-day countdown, which you can see that was what are we on? Day 2, so 2 days left. But the person had an incredible story about their experience. I want to say they'd attended maybe 6 or 7 Ski Specs or more, but the stories we were able to capture and just kind of have that information where we can kind of reuse that throughout the year. I mean, when we're talking about 2021, we're absolutely going to go back and be like, wow, that was a cool story. Let's pull that in so people are reminded of that experience that they had or that emotion they felt. So then during the actual Ski Spec event, we introduced a virtual event called Trek to Breck, which we hosted on Strava, which Strava is a free platform. There's paid options, but this was our first take at kind of testing in the waters to see if our audience would reciprocate involvement in this new platform. And so Trek to Breck turned out to be an awesome event that was really successful. We set the goal of from Hartford, Connecticut to Breckenridge, Colorado, which is 1,995 miles. The actual distance that was covered by 433 individuals was 7,288 miles. So I think we went back and forth from Hartford to Breckenridge. My math is not great at 7:30 p.m. I'm East Coast. But basically it resonated with our audience. And so now it's kind of, we're taking that and evolving it and figuring out, okay, what can we do now? But it was really a great test for us to try out a new virtual platform where folks might not have had that connection if we were actually in person, or if it was just virtual with just Zooms all day. So that was great. And then also with that, as you can see on the second image, we did a daily recap each day. So really kind of pulling from these different Zoom sessions that maybe folks attended, maybe they weren't able to hop on that one, but pulling out a couple quotes, a couple images, just to really have that kind of day end experience. So it was like, okay, day one, this is what we learned. This is what we're sharing out to our audience. If they attended, if they didn't attend, regardless, you can still experience it. So that was a huge part. But kind of those three pillars of like the countdown, the virtual event, and then, the recap were really successful for us for Ski Spectacular. And then I think my last part was how we can help you highlight events, which I touched on a little bit with regard to the website. Is more is better. The more information you provide us, the more you tag us in things, the more we can share out for you. So we're really here to help you. I'm on the back end, and I'm ready for your content. And so I'm ready to share out what you guys have. It's exciting, and it offers so much different, so many different opportunities to engage with different people. The more we can kind of cross share different social media posts, and that's kind of my spiel. Do we have questions? Did I miss anything, Dave? I saw you pop up.
Yeah, I just wanted to close with just a couple final tidbits. So just in terms of numbers, our magazine, I think the circulation of that magazine is over 35,000 people that it goes to. And in that magazine, we're highlighting adaptive sports, we're highlighting adaptive athletes, events, as well as our member organizations. As Jackie mentioned, our current website has 20 to 25,000 unique monthly visitors, and we expect that to go up significantly with a redesigned website that's better on SEO. Our social media tends to be, based on the channel, tends to be around 15 to 20,000 followers. These are opportunities for us to amplify your outreach efforts, and an opportunity for you to check out what other adaptive sports organizations in our membership are doing. Jackie mentioned social, and I just also wanted to mention, with very small dollars, there's opportunities for you to place ads in social media that are specific to your location, specific to the interests of the people that you would be advertising to, that could also help you recruit participation in your events. And we can talk with you in more detail about that if you're interested in that topic. And I also just wanted to tease a couple things that you'll be seeing from us in the next couple weeks. We are our podcast over the next 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to start seeing our adaptive sports podcast available, which includes lots of great content that Sean's responsible for. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but over the next week or two, they'll also be getting in the mail a copy of our current 2021 adaptive sports calendar. Hard copy in the mail, really great content and images, and you'll be seeing that from us as well. So just a couple of little things beyond the topics that we cover.
That's correct.
And if I could just chime in on that as well. If you guys think about it, there's about 10,000 people with our merge here that we haven't exposed right off the bat. So it's pretty awesome to think how, this is going to be a weird year. Who knows what's going to happen with attendance, but just from the merger alone and these resources and this team like Dave and Jackie and Sean, how we can just collectively increase by 10% maybe annually over the next 10 years of how many people are coming out to this series and all of your local events. So there's just some awesome opportunity here that I know I'm excited about, and hopefully you guys are too. So it's good things are ahead. It's a matter of just getting the word out and making sure all the awesome things that are going on the ground and with these athletes are being told and the stories are being told. So I'm excited. There's one other thing I wanted to mention, and that's the logo. You guys saw it at the beginning of the presentation, but Dave did a lockup of the Move United competition series logo. So once we've got your sanctioning application and it's been vetted and everything looks good, Shelly will send that out to you, and we would hope that you guys will use that and put that on all your materials and your website, and you know, make sure that everybody is identifying your event as part of this series. Hopefully that'll be beneficial to you. I'm gonna see if there's any questions for this team here, or comments, ideas. Somebody stump them with something. I know on the survey the poll we did with you guys before holidays, it looked like 50% don't have a relationship with your local media market. So hopefully this press release template can help. And I'm sure Sean or Jackie would be up, like they said earlier, for a call, or Dave, to talk through how to even start to tap into the media. It's so hit or miss if they're going to come out. You know, how can you spread the word locally? So hopefully that'll just be a starter to boost some of you guys up that don't have a relationship to start to build one.
I have just a comment or question for the marketing team. I heard a lot of references to adaptive athletes, and I know we've had this conversation a few times about like proper terminology, and I was just wondering if is that the term that we're using? I've personally kind of stuck with adaptive sports and calling athletes, but I know it's been a hot topic, but I heard it brought up a lot. So I was just curious if we had some input on, because I know there is no politically correct way to say things, but if there was just some thought into how to brand and how to phrase things consistently.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, you know, we as much as we can focus on the person first language, you know, not a disabled person, but a person with a disability, which is, but in terms of like adaptive athlete or athlete, I think that we use those interchangeably. Sometimes it's necessary to describe someone as an adaptive athlete because if we're sharing an image of the person, a person looking at that image might not realize that that person has a disability. So sometimes we feel like compelled to emphasize that the athlete's an adaptive athlete. But I think I don't, our experience hasn't been that whether you say it's athlete or adaptive athlete, that's problematic.
Again, if I could just piggyback off of that, I mean, we that's, I guess, the term that we've settled on as kind of a group term. I mean, we wouldn't say adaptive athlete Jane Doe or adaptive athlete John Doe, but you know, that's kind of like the term adaptive sport. You know, adaptive athlete is the next thing. I refer to, particularly in the magazine or other communications, as essentially everyone as an athlete. You know, even if we talk about recreational athletes, you know, often we'll use the term athlete. So whether it's if it's a hiker, for example, that's kind of the term that we've settled on in our communications.
And you'll often see we'll talk about athletes. We also will talk about participants if we're concerned that, like from a recreational standpoint in a communication, that if we are inviting athletes, that someone might think, well, I'm not an athlete, because they have in their mind what that means. And so sometimes you'll see us talk about our participants as participants, but that kind of depends on the channel and communication. So I think that's how we'd respond to that question.
We have any other questions, comments? Jesse, is there anything in the chat that we may have missed?
We have one question from Phil asking if this group can use the Move United webinar tools. I'm not sure if you're referring to the Zoom account or something else. I'm sure he was referring to the Zoom account. I know I'm going to come on video real quick. I know that on the sanctioning application, Shelly did put a question in there about if your event has to go virtual or if you're looking to do hybrid, do you need assistance from Move United? And that was an option where you could check yes or no. We've had a couple people express interest in having our help. I'm not sure that help is going to extend to offering you our Zoom account. However, we're happy to explore options with you of how you can go virtual or do things virtually at little to no cost to your organization. But that was all,
right.
Shelly.
Well, we want to be respectful of everybody's time this evening, particularly everybody who's on the East Coast. I know it's getting late for you. We had some fun stuff scheduled that we're going to push to our next meeting. But I do want to just thank Camille and Clayton from Angel City and Taylor from Arizona Disabled Sports for your willingness to participate this afternoon. We are going to push that to the next meeting. So we will talk about they're going to be sharing some of the things that they have found successful within their events to engage community and to engage the athletes. So we definitely want to get that information out to you, and we will plan on doing that next time. So thank you, and let me just run through here. So as always, this is your competition team. In 2021, I'm going to be your main point person. So even though everybody is involved on the team, we're going to try to filter questions and, needs for resources, whatever that you might have through me, and then I'll make sure that the appropriate resources or individual is in contact with you. So we're going to try to streamline this a little better. And of course, Paul Johnson, just with his wealth of knowledge, is always going to be behind the scenes. So there's our contact information. Of course, our social media handles, always want to have you in connection with us there. So with that said, thank you for your time, and we will be in touch. As always, if you need anything from us, please reach out. Appreciate it. I hope you have a good evening. Good night.